The following is a training conducted by Larry Raff, creator of Abacus, entitled Determining a Major Gift Ask Amount. And it was done for the Association of Fundraising Professionals, Northern New England chapter on April 30th for 45 participants. Let's make this an interactive conversation. I know there's a lot of us here, but if you have a question and you prefer to put it in chat, please do. Otherwise, just unmute and blurt out your question. Say, hey, Larry, what about this? Push back. We're also going to be getting into a breakout session in a little while, and there'll be 10 breakout sessions. So what are we going to talk about today? A process for planning the size and scope of a major gift ask, a multi-year pledge. If you're like most groups, when I ask the question, how many of you have a formal process for determining how much to ask someone for a gift, no one will raise their hand, maybe one person. Over the last 10 years, I've gotten 3 hands. Understanding what information you need to make a respectful ask. Do you have enough information? There are some key pieces of information that are probably important to have if you want to walk into the room fully prepared. And as we'll see, there's going to be wide variability in what people think the ask should be based on the same pieces of information. And we'll discuss why that variability exists. So let's start. And I'll ask the question of, how do you determine how much to ask for in your own shop? Here's a few common answers. You ask your volunteers who know the donor. What does your gut tell you? Some of you have Donor Search or Wealth Engine or iWave or similar capacity related services. And sometimes that capacity data is your primary source of information to use. Broader prospect research, certainly giving history to your organization, not only how much, but how many gifts, what's the loyalty over time, what's the largest gift that was made by the donor, and so forth. And then there's a rule of thumb out there. If you're just flying by the seat of your pants, if you look at the average annual gift and multiply that by 20, that would be your 3-year pledge ask for a relatively cold situation. And I will say that I have found this to be rather true over the years, surprisingly so. Does anyone have anything to add in terms of your own shop as to how you all come up with a number? Let's talk about, what are you asking for, right? Are you asking for a 3-year pledge, a 5-year pledge, a 7-year pledge? Cash, stock, some kind of a planned gift instrument, something physical, a second house, third house, a boat, what have you. I circled here a lead trust because I want for the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation. I met with an older couple in their late 70s 2 or 3 times in their apartment, and then finally in their attorney's office. I had interviewed the attorney prior and learned that they had great wealth in Berkshire Hathaway stock. They befriended Warren Buffett 50 years ago, and they bought Berkshire Hathaway at $28 a share, and they bought 10,000 shares. At the time, it was trading at $40,000 a share. And I asked this couple for a lead trust of $20 million. And a lead trust is you put $20 million in the bank, and the dividends and the earnings are given to the nonprofit. And then after 10 or 15 years, the donor gets the money back. Little did I know, Berkshire Hathaway stock does not pay dividend. So there was no source of that earnings for the nonprofit. And so it was a really stupid gift to ask for because there was no way to get money to the nonprofit. So I circle that, making the point that understanding the person's asset and where their assets are coming from are going to be important in your consideration. So know what you're going in asking for and let the donor figure out how to get it done. So for instance, maybe you're talking to a CEO of a corporation and you know who that person's wealthy and you want a corporate gift and they have a family foundation. just put a number on the table and say, however you want to figure out getting this amount to my organization is great. I'm not in a position to figure that out for you, but please consider a gift of $100,000 from whatever sources make sense for you. Know what you're asking for. Who is the decider in your organization? Ultimately, someone has to finally put the stamp of approval on the amount you're going to ask for. Is it you, your supervisor, gift officers, your volunteer solicitor? Is it a kumbaya, everyone joins hands? Maybe some of you rely on a prospect researcher to do the dirty work for you, and you go with that. Who makes the decisions in your shop when you're going forward with an ask? I'm looking at Kristen Welch here, so I'm gonna put Kristen on the spot to unmute and tell us who does it in your shop.
It's usually my recommendation to our executive director. And then usually it's the two of us who make that decision.
So the executive director ultimately, based on your recommendation?
She kind of would give not ultimately, but she actually used to have my job. So she knows our donors very well. So it's a really nice way. I don't think a lot of organizations might have that level of relationship, but she also knows them very well because she did that. She worked with them for a number of years before I came on board. So yeah, so it's usually kind of, we always talk about it together, but it's usually based on my recommendation.
Great. Maddie, could you unmute? And how does it work in your shop?
Our vice president of philanthropy makes the decision.
Becky, now that you're got your head out of the kitchen sink, why don't you share with us?
Yeah, I mean, it's still dripping. It's just me. It's me and a gut feeling.
Becky and a gut feeling. Okay. And sometimes that works out just fine, and sometimes probably not.
Oh yeah, no.
So one of the things to consider, right, to put your gut in alignment with something or another, rather than just putting your finger in the breeze and hoping for the best. Obviously, age, what is the life cycle of the donor? Are they in full earning mode in their 40s and 50s and 60s? Are they preparing for retirement? Are they in retirement? Gender may have a role here, may not. The level of involvement in your organization, very important. Do they look to your organization as sort of their primary involvement with the nonprofit? Did they interface with your organization? So in the case of healthcare, were they a patient or a family member of a patient? Were they an alum of the school, the private school, higher ed? Are they subscribers to your performing arts program and what have you? What's their emotional touch point? Strength of personal relations. People give to people. That is a true thing, truism. Do they have a close relationship with the senior executive, an important leadership volunteer, program officer? Examples of giving to other organizations. It gives you a sense of, are they philanthropic people? How philanthropic are they? Just because a wealth rating says they have a capacity of $10,000 and they gave a gift of $50,000 or $100,000 in cash somewhere else, that tells you what they can do, and that tells you how much to rely on the wealth assessment and the philanthropy capacity assessment. Gifts to your organization, obviously look at how many, how much, largest gift to your organization, the nature of the assets as we talked about, and then finally, have they made giving sounds? What do I mean by giving sounds? So in the process of your interaction with your donor, either through discovery or at an event or through just meetings you have to build your relationship, have they mentioned their interest in supporting your campaign, your initiative, your mission, your special project? Those are giving sounds. And if you're actively listening, you'll hear them. And that's really, really important to be listening for. People may also give you financial stress sounds. Gee, I have 3 kids in college. I just made a big pledge to, the YMCA. So they're going to give you a tip that, hey, watch it. Don't go overboard. Don't ask me for way too much. And they're going to do that if you're listening for it. What other variables do people consider when you're trying to decide a gift?
I would say how passionate they are about whatever it is that you've whether you're able to make that alignment with something they really care deeply about, and how much they feel like can have an impact on that passion.
Great. Passion, definitely. But we all know giving has an emotional component. Some people may want to see the finances, they may want to see the budget, but they're still going to have an emotional connection. I'm going to move on. So what are the biggest wealth concerns of high net worth households? You need to be aware of this going in under any circumstances, of what are on people's mind. People who have, I mean, this is something that's not uncommon to all of us, and in particular, people of wealth. We all are interested in having adequate income for our lives and to hedge against economic and health downturns, right? We all want to be sort of secure in that regard. And the presumption is people who are philanthropists and who are generous have already figured that out. And they have a plan, and they have it covered. Divorces are a thing. I'm sure we've all bumped against it. I interviewed a very wealthy fellow for a study a couple of months ago, and I asked him about his support for the campaign effort. And he says, well, I got divorced a year ago, and now I have half the money I had than before. So let's start at that point. So these are very real issues for people. And so being aware of if there's been a divorce, if there's been some kind of business event, failure, decline, if they're in an industry that's office real estate developer, you might consider those things as well these days. And then estate planning, we all know the Warren Buffett line, I want to leave my children enough that they can do anything, but not so much that they'll do nothing. And so in the course of your discovery and conversations with people and discussing, you might get to the point of discussing their estate. And these are great clues to try and uncover when you're talking to them. Now we're going to have some fun. You all received this as a handout. And what we're going to do is go through these variables, these discovery pieces of information. And then we're going to break out into small groups in the breakout rooms. And I'm going to ask you as a group to come up with an ask amount and an ask goal, meaning I'm going to ask 50 to get $30,000. So an ask amount and an ask goal for a 3-year pledge. For a 3-year pledge, those are your instructions. And of the members of your group, the person who has the last name that's closest to A is the spokesperson for your group. So here we have a couple. They're both 55. They're both working. They're not retired. They've given $15,000 to your organization through 8 gifts. Average gift of $1,875. Their largest gift was $5,000. And their largest known gift to another organization is $15,000 in cash. Their philanthropic capacity estimate, whatever service you're using, is rated at $50,000. That's the low end. It's probably 50 to 100. They do not serve on the board. They do not serve on any committees. They're a former board member, one of them. One of them serves on other boards, split allegiance. They have a close relationship with one of your board members. They attend your organization fundraising events. They have not made a written estate gift intention to you. They have not. They have made a memorial or tribute gift to your organization. They have not made an in-kind gift, like an auction item gift. The gift purpose is consistent with your stated interests. So you've been talking to them about your upcoming campaign. You've been talking to them about the piece of equipment you need to buy. And they're interested. They've made giving sounds. They've not made financial stress sounds. And at least one solicitor is liked and respected by your donor. So what I'm going to ask now is whoever's running the show to break us in the small groups. You have 10 minutes. You have the handout. Please discuss this. And when we come back, I'm going to ask each group to report out an ask amount and an ask goal for a 3-year pledge and keep notes about what other information you wish you had. I'm going to ask group 1, or did you all know which groups you were in? I'm going to ask the spokesperson for each group.
Okay, I'm lucky group number 1 spokesperson, and we had a few different answers, but I'm going to go with our goal was 50,000 with a pledge ask of 25 per year, asking for 75 over 3 years.
75. Okay, group 2 or another person.
Yes, our pledge goal was 50 with a pledge ask of 45.
Is it backwards?
Nope, that's it's not backwards. That was correct. Even though that was our goal of 50, we didn't feel they were capable of getting to 50, so we wanted to ask for 45.
Okay, interesting. That's a first. That's never happened before. Okay, next person.
Our pledge goal, we were hoping that, pledge ask for, right. So our pledge goal was 30, and then our ask was 45.
Thank you.
I'll jump in too. I don't know what group number we were.
It's fine. It's fine.
But our ask was going to be 40 with the goal of closing at 30.
Okay.
Our pledge goal was 50 with an ask of 75.
An ask of 75.
Yep, and it was actually 50 for the goal.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Ours was 30 and 30.
A lot of confidence there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ours was 15 and 30.
This would be above and beyond asking for their annual fund gift to be sustained at their largest gift level. The goal is 15 and the target 12.5, which is 20 times their average gift.
So I'm sorry, the ask is 15?
Yes, and above their annual fund gift, and the the target is 12.5, which is 20 times their average gift.
Okay. So this is the first person to raise the double ask concept, right? And rightfully, none of you talked about an estate gift as a blended gift as part of their outright gift, something in their estate plan. And
Actually, we did. Sorry to interrupt you, Larry.
No, that's fine.
We did talk about that a little bit. Yeah.
Good. So the variability here is not profound, but it is. We go from essentially 15 to 50, right? And we go from 15 to 75 in terms of the asks. So here's a group of not homogeneous folks, but you're from similar cultural regions, and we have some pretty significant variability. Any thoughts on this?
Larry, we talked a little bit about, you had asked what were some other questions or things you would like to know that might impact this. Right. And a couple of the things that we talked about were, we would have liked to know what type of gifts they were making. Were these cash gifts? Were they giving from a donor advised fund, utilizing, an IRA or stock? Because that may have impacted our ask, or whether we did a blended ask, kind of if we knew a little bit more about that. We also would have liked to have known, we know that this person has made 8 gifts, but were those 8 gifts year after year? Were they over a longer period of time? We would have liked to.
That's why it says cash gift. So the 15,000 to another organization was a check for 15.
Okay. Yeah. So we wanted to know how long the donor had been connected to our organization, those 8 gifts. And then also, was their largest gift that they had done before part of a campaign? Was this sort of just a regular major gift ask? Those were some of the pieces that we had thought about that, if we knew a little bit more, may have influenced how we organized our ask.
And Larry, just to clarify on ours, we felt like to get to 60, it would be a 5-year ask. So on a 3-year ask, it was more relevant to be at 45. So the conversation was to go above the 50, but we felt like based on the criteria of the family, it was better to actually look at a 3 or 45 plan.
Well, Seth, there's a school of thought that says if you think they would get to, let's say, 75,000 if it were a 5-year pledge period, that you ask the 75,000 for the 3-year pledge period, and you close the gift by extending it to 5 years.
Mm.
That's part of the conversation. So you push the envelope in the ask number if you think they can do it at 5 years, but start at 3, because major gifts is a negotiation. At the end, at the end of the day, that's often what it comes down to.
So in addition to what was just said, we would have been able to raise our goal and our ask amount if we had information that told us where we fell in the donors' priorities. Where are we in their top 3? Are we number 10? Are we at the bottom of 100 organizations? And how close is that relationship with the board member? And if that board member would be able to be involved in the solicitation or willing to be involved in the solicitation. And if that 5,000, that high gift amount, was that while they were on the board or while they weren't on the board? And so those things made a huge difference to us in kind of lowballing this particular ask and not pushing for those higher amounts.
So in your considerations, you erred on the less optimistic scenario.
Yeah, very conservative in this case. But with that additional information, that would give us the confidence to go for some of those higher gift amounts.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Colleen?
Hi. So our group had similar discussions as some of the other groups, and I personally felt that we were lacking significant information, especially having a board member who knew the donor, right? We don't know what their capacity is, whether the husband or wife worked for a public firm where their income was available, whether all their assets were tied up in real estate in their home. There was a lot of, you had active listening aspects to this that were missing, and they've been in a relationship with the organization for 8 years. So I would say shame on us for not having that information. And that actually gave pause to our discussion about what it was. We were on a couple of, sides of the fence because, it sounds like we didn't do our due diligence to make a bold ask. So my approach would be to come in like in a similar range with a $30,000 or, $30,000, hopefully getting 25, stewarding the heck out of them and getting more information over the next 3 years and building upon that. So it just seemed like we could use a few more pieces of information to really feel confident in the ask.
Colleen, thank you for that. You raised a lot of important points. And I think most importantly is the ultimate ask, if you will, isn't always the first. You want to get them in the game. There's a lot of philanthropists, sophisticated philanthropists who will give you an introductory gift, and they want to see how you treat them, how you handle them. And then they come back around toward the end of the campaign or toward the end of the initiative, and the door is open to talk to them about another topping off gift, if you will. So good points all. And that list is meant to sort of help you understand what you do and do not know, what you really need to know. Some of the nuances that were raised about did they make the gift while they were a board member or not may not be as important if you decide to go bold, and then you'll get your response, whether or not that was okay, important or not. I want to share with you. I've been doing this now for 10 plus years with fundraisers, with more than 400 gift officers have done exactly what you've just done. with the exact same set of data. And you'll see here that the goals ranged from 15,000 to 120,000 and 25, and the ask 25,000 to 180,000. Enormous variability. Clearly, there are biases at play here, and we'll talk about that in a minute. This is so you'll see here that the median ask is $60,000, and this illustration is a pledge ask of 61,000 and a goal of 47,000. This is I'm taking a moment of privilege to show you the results page of a calculator that I have built to help fundraisers come up with a number. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But the calculator is essentially calibrated in part to address all those responses and to come in at the median, but also addressing prospective pledges that have been made recently and how they relate to what the calculator suggested. So we've
Sorry,
talked.
we have another hand raised.
Go ahead, Patty. Go ahead.
Thanks. I'm sorry. It's not that important, but I'm just curious if this is a totally fictional donor or if we're ever going to hear the truth.
Is a totally fictional donor, and partly the reason for that is there are so many independent variables, right? The nature of your organization, the goal of your campaign. Is it a campaign ask? Is it a 3-year equipment ask or a mission ask? How good is the gift officer? Is the CEO in the room? And is the CEO doing that? I can go on and on and on and on and on. As you know, there are so many variables that it's important to understand you're never going to have perfect information. Never. And therefore, you need to do the best you can, which is why we're here talking. I once I was campaign counsel to the Miami Cancer Institute, and we were talking to a family about naming the institute. And I hired outside researchers. They came back and said $5 million ask. And I talked to some board members who knew the donor family, and got a sense of where their wealth came from. And it came from patent income, like the pump on the Windex bottle, like LASIK surgery, serious patents. And what you don't know, what researchers can't see is cash. They cannot see cash from patents into a bank account and then into investments. No one can see that. And the staff wanted to ask for 25 million. And I said, no, we're asking for 50. And I was the one to do the ask because the gift officer wasn't up to it. And the matriarch of the family said, we're good for that. Boom, just like that. Didn't miss a beat. And so just because you've got certain information, street research is probably the most valuable of them all. There are simply things that electronic information will not uncover. Like person just sold their business. They have tons of appreciated founder stock. And you got to get to them this year. For instance, things of that nature. And nothing you can look up online is going to tell you that. What other information did you all want? Wish you had. Colleen.
I was going to say, to your point, electronic information can actually be your enemy, in some ways, right? Because you can't verify the source of what it is. And I agree. You can, if it jives with your street information, bingo. But if it doesn't, that could have you go sideways. So I agree. Yeah.
It can get you in trouble.
Yeah.
Can. So what are some of the most important variables to consider? Are they philanthropic or are they transactional? We all know the quid pro quo problem, right? Particularly around businesses. Relationships, the donor's relationship with your askers, with the people making the ask, all important. What's their capacity? Street research combined with other research. involvement with your organization, giving loyalty. Someone asked earlier about how long have they been involved with the organization. That's where the number of gifts can help reflect that, right? If they've got 20 gifts, then they've been around a while. And also, to another point, the only way you can make a donor loyal is by asking them all the time for a gift, i.e. a direct mail program and direct email programs, face-to-face events. So you've got to have opportunities for people to become loyal donors in the first place. And then they're giving to other organizations. There's also a linear relationship between political giving and philanthropic giving. If someone gives a lot to political campaigns, they're probably philanthropic in a relative scale. So all important these to me are centrally important variables to consider, lacking anything else. Now here's another scenario where we don't have time to do a breakout. But this is a higher end retired couple. They've given $150,000. You can see the numbers here. They're on the board of directors. They're all in, giving sounds, the whole shoot and match. And look here. The goal ranges from 50,000 to 2 million. And the ask ranged from 50,000 to 3 million. Same group as the other case study, right? We all have our money biases, and then the calculator comes in quite close to the median ask amount. So what are the reasons for the variability? Let's talk about that a little bit. Gift officers have different personal relationships with money. We all grew up in different circumstances, right? A $5,000 gift to me could be the same as a $100,000 gift from you in relative terms. So our ability to detach our bias about money and determining an amount is centrally important. Professional experience. Maybe you just haven't done a lot of asks, so you're nervous. We all went through that. It's understandable, but it doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter. It's about the donor. It's not about you. Organization self-esteem and history of gifts. How many times, depending on your organization, how could I possibly ask someone for $1 million for my little organization? Who am I to do such a thing? Well, you're the person who should do such a thing. That's the job. And if it's appropriate, if all the things line up to where that donor who's loyal and on the board and has given huge gifts to other organizations and not yours, and loves you, why not ask for that aspirational gift? What's the worst that can happen?
Say no.
And finally, the size of the initiative and campaign goal. Your chances of getting $1 million gift are much greater on a campaign that's $10 million than a campaign that's $5 million. So when determining a goal for, let's say, a campaign, you may want to take the risk of a higher aspirational goal. So would you rather have a goal of 5 million and raise 5 million, or maybe raise 6 million? Or would you rather have a goal of 10 million and raise 8 million, declare victory, and go on? Your chances of getting...
I beg to differ there.
Go ahead, go for it.
No one doesn't want to not meet their goal.
That's true, but wouldn't you rather have an extra $3 million?
I don't know. I mean, financially, of course, but from like a communications strategic campaign goal always.
Do you think the public's paying attention to what your goal is?
I think the board of trustees is concerned about what the public is concerned about. I take that back. I think the board of trustees would be concerned about how it would look, regardless of how it actually looks.
So it's inside baseball considerations.
Yep.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this? Terry?
I do. I think that particularly for capital campaigns, having a working goal in the early phases of the campaign really tests the variability and how audacious an organization can be, because during planning, you have your own set of internal and external variables that you're weighing, and then there's that you don't know what you don't know, and the you never know moments in a campaign. And so I find that my clients are best served with a working goal until they're through their top prospects for the lead gift, and then they set a public goal, which becomes the final goal. And what that does is it energizes your lead gift prospects, and then that leadership energizes the rest of the campaign.
Well, it looks like you have been down that road before, clearly. All good points. That's the value of a quiet leadership phase of a campaign.
I was going to say that happens in the silent phase, right? So when you do all your tweaking, yeah.
Yeah, that internal goal is internal. And so the insiders, the people you want the most from, are the ones that get to play with that number. So the working goal could be quite aspirational, and you can get lucky, and then you can just announce a smaller goal if you find you need to. I've always said the best feasibility study is the lead gift. And I found that to be true. So it's a chicken and egg kind of situation, to be sure. Are there other reasons people think there's such wide variability in responses? Yeah.
Was one other question in the chat from Hope. She said, "Isn't it taboo to raise less money than a campaign goal?"
Well, like I said, taboo, absolutely not. You do the best you can. Economic situations change, leadership changes in the organization. Your lead donor, has an event. We did a campaign study for a major arts organization in Boston, and the chairman of the board was widely known to be extraordinarily wealthy and extraordinarily generous. And as our interviews proceeded, all the board members and others were all saying, whatever he does will affect what I do. Right? They were gauging their depth of their response to the lead gift. We even had a board member that said, "I'll match the board chair's gift up to $5 million." I mean, how great is that, right? And I asked the board chair, and it finally came down to the CEO closing the door and saying, "Okay, I want to ask you to give $5 million." And the board chair said, "I'll give you $500,000. Why? Because they had just named 2 buildings on their respective alma maters, husband and wife. They'd basically just dropped $100 million elsewhere. And he was tapped out philanthropically. So that changed the entire chemistry of the campaign. Just like that.
Larry, I had a question, and I think this is, I think you've already said this, but you said, what are some of the other reasons why it could be such a variable? And I was thinking, like I said, I think you've mentioned this, it's just pure ignorance on behalf of what people are capable of. Is it possible to have a successful major gifts program without something like Wealth Engine, where there's like an outside, software to do the personal asset scraping? Because, when I said that it's really based upon my gut, it's because I don't really have a lot of tools, and we've been hesitating whether or not to utilize something like that, hence the RFP. But is it possible to have a successful major gifts program in approaching people for an amount that is appropriate to them without doing that wealth screening?
Oh, Becky, I lived in a day when there was no microwaves.
Well, right, yes,
So
same.
so I was a frontline fundraiser for 20 years before the internet.
Right.
Okay, so we didn't have wealth assessment tools, and so the point is, yes, of course you can. And the greatest value of the wealth screening tools is to help segment your file, is to try and find those people who you need to focus your narrow bandwidth on first. And as you dig more deeply, you'll find that the philanthropic capacity ratings become a little squishy, and you can't rely on them as the primary data point. They're one data point, but they help get you to that 10% of the crop. And that's your greatest value. And you're going to miss some people. I've seen billionaires rated at $25,000 regularly.
So is it just like a lot of internet stalking and community stalking?
Great research. Talk to people who know them.
Yeah. So Larry, just to kind of drive home that the Wealth Engine only captures public information. All the information that you give out when you send in your warranty cards and all of that sort of stuff. So you can find the same information yourself, just like you said, by digging. You just need, a trusted volunteer that signs a confidentiality and ethics clause and things like that, and set them on the case for a couple of people. But it makes it easier, but we have to verify that anyway, because it could be miss the boat completely.
That's just a huge time.
Yeah.
I don't want to say it's a time
Colleen,
sink,
some of that is information you have to buy.
Exactly. It costs a lot of money.
LexisNexis and all the rest.
What do you think Facebook is doing all this time? My niece collects it all for Disney. They scoop up everything we put into our computers, repackage it, and sell it. So yeah.
There you go. Sarah, you have a
question? I guess I'm still like stuck on this ask that you described where they asked their board chair for $5 million and got a tenth of that. How, even in a world, an organization without access to the digital tools, even at that, how could you prevent that from happening? Because that seems like it shouldn't have happened.
Well, it shouldn't have happened, and I lay that at the feet of the CEO of the nonprofit, because he wasn't keeping in touch. He didn't have a relationship with his board chair sufficient to know that the board chair was making these two magnificent gifts to their alma maters. He didn't know it. So the CEO and the board chair need to be like that. There's also the situation where I went to ask someone I'd been cultivating for a long time. I brought the board chair, I brought my boss and the campaign chair to his house to ask him for $250,000 and to get to his employer where the big money was, right? And he turned us down flat, zero, boom. And he took the meeting. But 2 days before the meeting, his primary client was on his deathbed, and he didn't know what his future looked like. So he had to decline. So we left the meeting. Thank you very much. We left the meeting. I wanted to blow my brains out. And I called Mike up. I said, Mike, let's have lunch tomorrow, because I had a relationship. And I said, listen, you're going to land on your feet. I know you want to be part of this campaign. Would you please consider a gift of $100,000? This is in the 90s. And he gave $100,000. So point is, no is not always no. But the depth of a relationship is centrally important. The CEO did not have a deep enough relationship with his board chair. I had a good relationship with this donor. Centrally important. So I'm going to suggest the following for all of you to consider doing. Pull together as much bias-free data as you can. Package it in a profile and share it with the people who know the donor. They could be staff, volunteers, trusted volunteers, and put a recommended number on the table for everyone to discuss. And it will come back high or low as a final. It should be a team discussion and a team decision, if at all possible. Include people with different perspectives. You're going to get, so for instance, you're going to get some donors who are going to say, you know, ask Joe for $100,000. I want to really stick it to him. Or ask Joe for $25,000 because I don't want you asking me for 50, right? This happens. They're going to set the bar for you. Don't let them do that. They're one voice in the crowd. You need to work from objective data, because if you let someone else set the bar for you, institutional self-esteem comes into play, and those quid pro quo transactional issues come into play, and you need to avoid those. And by having a group discussion and having a person finally say, yes, it's me, I'm making the decision. If there's blowback, I'll take it, but I have a basis from which we've made the decision. Colleen, I'll get you in a second.
No worries.
Analysis paralysis. You will never have all the information you want. You need to do your best with what you have and what you can reasonably expect to get. And then go to your group. And if you're going to focus on anything, it's going to be, are they philanthropic and engaged, and is a member of the solicitation team close to the donor? Respected, close, liked. And I want to add that if you don't have someone who has a personal relationship with the donor, and it happens, right? You've got an annual donor who's very wealthy and loyal, but no one really knows him. Prestige. Having someone of prestige in the room will make a difference, i.e. the board chair, the executive director, a well-known business person in the community. It makes a big difference. So I did a campaign in Pittsburgh, and I was with a well-known businessman, and we sat in a room in the Duquesne Club, and donors came in and met with us for 30 minutes and left. And we asked each and every one of them for high six-figure gifts. We had never met any of them. They had all been cultivated by the local chapter. We had never met any of them. And we raised well over $2 million in 2 hours of just meeting strangers. But the prestige of that guy I was with in the room named for his family made all the difference. So that relationship piece is important, but not critical always. Colleen.
So all in line with what you're talking about, and wonder if anybody else, I'm sure you've had this experience that, a couple of occasions I've had lead board members randomly select, high profile individuals that are in the community that have absolutely no relationship to the organization, couldn't get them to have a relationship, but insist that we focus a lot of time crafting an ask to just kind of it's like spitting in the wind. How do you navigate that internally? Because they're not willing to reach out, but they're insisting, like these are, your board members that give, that you kind of chase this rabbit around the field. How do you navigate that?
We navigate it by saying, here is our major donor pipeline for this initiative. And the reason these people are top of the pipeline is for these reasons, because there's a linkage. Yeah. We have a linkage of people and their experience with the organization. And if you want to go, and then you tell that board member, if you want to be a spot player for the campaign and arrange a conversation with that person and get them educated about our organization, let's start that process. Yeah. But you don't cold call them and ask them for a gift.
No, absolutely not. But
Colleen, I would say to them, turn it back on them and say, right. What if somebody from the, XYZ organization just came knocking on your door with someone you knew and asked you for $50,000. How would you feel?
Exactly. Yeah.
You would never give a dime to that organization again. So turn the tables on. Okay, we're near the end here. Let me run through this last slide. So when's the right time to ask? Strong relationship with the donor. You're working with someone who does have that relationship ideally, or using prestige. Have you been able to answer all, if not most, if not all of those questions in that profiles, those 2 profiles at minimum, to be able to answer those questions? Put together the best solicitation team, and numbers are important. If you're meeting with a couple, it's better to go in with 3 people. If you're meeting with 1 person, no more than 2 people on the team. Don't overwhelm somebody. I believe in ganging up on people. If you have a couple of volunteers or staff who are close with the donor, have them in the room, and if that's the only time to exceed that ratio of 1 to 2 and 2 to 3. And then has the donor agreed to meet to discuss a gift? That's when you know the donor is ready to have a gift conversation. They've accepted the meeting. And it's the meeting that you've told them is about their support of the campaign. Therefore, they are ready. But never blindside. The purpose of the meeting is always front and center. And if they agree to the meeting, you are 90% home. That's when the negotiation begins. Good questions, good comments, good discussion. Anything else from anyone about anything? I will then plug this. You could check it out, donorabacus.com. If you want to kick the tires, you can play with it for a week at no cost to run some of your pipeline through it, your portfolio through it, and see how you come out the other end. Right now, the accuracy of our goals, the goal that the calculator comes up with, is within 2% of actual pledges. I've been in situations, some of you have as well, when I've asked someone for a gift. Let's say, I've asked Colleen for $100,000 gift, and Colleen says, "Thanks, Larry. I'll give it some thought." Colleen then picks up the phone, calls my boss, and says, "Sarah, what is Larry smoking? He just asked me for $100,000. Colleen says, "I'll look into it." Colleen calls Larry. "Larry, where did that number come from?" Right? There's, Sarah calls me. "Where did that number come from?" I need to be able to answer the question. I can't say it was my gut, because that reflects poorly on me. I can say, well, we collected all this information. We discussed it among those people who know the donor, who know Colleen, and this was our most respectful yet bold decision. Or you've used a calculator and as part of your process. And this is our most respectful, bold yet respectful ask amount. And I will tell you, whenever I do an ask, and I just did some last month, I always end it with, "And Colleen, if I have not asked you for enough, please tell me." Because you may have come in thinking 150,000. I don't know what you have. Nobody ever knows. And you need to leave room for an upside error, right? We're always afraid of asking for too much, but you need to leave room for the upside possibility of Colleen is much wealthier and much more philanthropic than we knew. So opening that door, and also, by the way, when you say that, 100% of the time, I get either a smile or a giggle out of the donor. And whenever you want someone considering making a gift, you want them to have a smile on their face at the time they're thinking about it. So even if you think it's a silly thing to do, it has a purpose.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, you can. Okay. I just had a question. You said earlier that you always make the purpose of the meeting really clear. So sometimes we've been known to say, well, we'd like to come talk with you about, all the accomplishments of our organization. And we'll usually say, and your support. Is that what you mean by making it clear? Like just a general statement like that? Or are you being, I guess you'd be clearer if you're doing a campaign at the time. But how do you typically do that initial ask for a meeting?
Well, let's separate a discussion about annual support and special purpose support. And for annual support, what you just described, as far as I'm concerned, is fine. But if you've been educating and preparing someone for a campaign gift or an initiative gift that's much larger than they typically give, then you need to set it up that way. We'd like to have a meeting with you to discuss your support of the campaign. So that, again, it'll be the bellwether for you. If they take the meeting, great. You've done your job cultivating them. Or the right person has asked for the meeting. Okay.
There are a couple questions in the chat.
Okay, I have not.
Anita had asked, are major gifts usually cultivated as part of a specific campaign, not just annual giving?
Maybe it's usually cultivated as part of a specific. Typically, yes. Typically, you need a case for support, right? You need something written down that says, hey, Larry, I want you to give us a lot of money. And here's why. And if you can't put it on a page or two, then you probably shouldn't be talking to anyone about a major gift. So if you can come up with a case for support that supports your mission, your vision, outside of a campaign, it's not a campaign. It's just that you want to steer the organization toward this new goal, this new vision. It's going to require additional funds to get there. And we want to ask for your generous, for your extraordinary support through a gift of $50,000 that can be paid over 3 years. And Sharon, if I haven't asked you for enough, please tell me. So it does not have to be for a campaign, but it needs to be for a reason. That I should give you, instead of $1,000 a year, $50,000 over 3 years. You need to have a reason. And if it's a good reason, great. If it's more of the same, well, maybe that's not so great. If it's doing more better for more people, maybe that's enough.
Here we carved out a couple of what we're calling key strategic initiatives that are focused on specific projects here at New Hampshire Public Radio. And so we've been asking, it's like campaign style asks, but we're not actually, at least not yet, in a campaign, but that's worked quite well. We have case statements for each. And
thank you. Exactly to the point. Here's our mission. Here's how we execute our mission. And here's another way we're going to be able to execute our mission, right? And we've done a pilot on it. We've done some experimentation. We feel good that this is going to be successful, and it's going to cost an extra whatever. And that's why we're talking. I do. There's a question about, do I do trainings? I do trainings, yes, for different conferences from time to time. Also, I would invite you all to read my blog. It's sort of a masterclass on a lot of topics over the last, 12 years.